Good morning, dear colleagues. This is a great honor to be here. Thank you, Lime, for invitation. And from my point of view, this is good that this conference take place 1 year later than it was planned, because I can present you a small part of my latest work. I am trying to write, or I am writing a book about digital childhood at the moment. Book will be in Latvian, of course. And today I will present a short part from one chapter about digital crisis of childhood. I don't remember why I called my presentation as some reflection from point of view of philosophy of education, because they will be some reflection from the point of view of childhood studies. But anyway, the idea is the same. I would like to say that I am very far from theology and from a religious education. Last time in a theological conference I was in 2010 together with Laima in Rome, and it was a year when volcano collapsed in Iceland, and we went back home not by plane but by train and car and one more car and one more car. Yeah, this is it. I am here again, and this part of my book, of my text, is translated in English in very difficult words, because this is why I will read my text. Yeah. So digital childhood. Childhood was discovered in the 17th century. In the 18th, it started taking up the recognizable shape. In the 20th century, childhood began to collapse. And in the 21st, it might disappear completely unless there is a serious interest in preserving it. This is a quote from Neil Postman's book, Building a Bridge to the 18th Century, 1999, who, based on assessment of the impact of television, announced the threat of childhood extinction. A little over 20 years have passed since the book was published, and with relief, we must acknowledge that childhood still exists. However, perhaps not in a way and in the form that many of us would like. Nevertheless, society still recognizes and understands the concept and its manifestations, or at least people believe to understand it. Indeed, in the digital age, it is quite typical to be horrified by daily habits of people in general and children in particular. We have assumed that childhood is in a crisis. If we accept the crisis is a provocation and catalyst for moving to the next stage, then we may agree that no, there is a digital crisis of childhood. Let's face it that today the question, what is childhood, is not so easy to answer. In 1962, the historian Philippe Barrière, in his Centuries of Childhood, described childhood as a specific stage in a person's life, characterized by innocence, ignorance, dependence, and adult concern. This is, so say, the child should, at least in a theory, be a happy and obedient being controlled and directed by adults. Unfortunately, in digital culture, adults do not understand a part of children's culture, the one related to technology. And they cannot even access this culture due to the lack of certain skills. Consequently, the thesis about adult power and responsibility for child's life in its classical understanding becomes problematic. Adults who have always been directors of children's lives feel confused. The perception of happy childhood based on examples from the 1970s no longer corresponds to what we observe in our families and society in large. Let's admit that today our children's childhood is quite different from ours. It is longer, full of different symbols, values, attitudes, and social habits. As a social construct, childhood is gradually shifting to a different form. Researchers of childhood name this new concept as digital childhood and recognize it as seriously worth exploring because Postman was right at least on one respect, and that is children's culture in the 20th century understanding has disappeared. Digital childhood is one of the concepts. Okay, I forgot to change slides, sorry. This is the correct slide. Digital childhood is the one of the concepts that emerged in a field of childhood research in the beginning of the 21st century. The invasion of digital technologies in children's daily lives did not only change the daily lives of children, but also started the academic debate about a new form of childhood that, unlike other forms, is constructed not only socially, but also virtually. Unlike previous conception of childhood, digital childhood take place not only in real, but also in a digital space. And it is the use of digital tools and resources that promotes the socialization of children and prepares them for the status of adults and the future of the adult world. Digital childhood began to emerge as a social construct when digital technologies and the internet become an integral part of everybody's life. I would like to emphasize that the internet was not created for children, but it is the digital literacy of children and even babies and their habits of using technologies that is one of the current fields of research in contemporary social sciences. This is unique direction of research because 0-year-old internet user is radically new social phenomenon without background knowledge on it. Of course, research on children and the media has been actively conducted since 1960s. It is enough to remember media pedagogy. However, it must be acknowledged that infants' habits of technology use do sound challenging, as humanity has not had and can't have had any such previous experience at all. The concept of digital childhood is made up of three thematic circles: a healthy child, developing of new understanding and guidelines on the impact of digitalization of the child's physical and mental well-being and development, an educated child, to develop technology enriched learning models, approaches, and good practices that promote children's educational opportunities by providing an inclusive environment, and connected child. They raise children's proper understanding of the use of technologies in order to foster positive relationships with peers, family, community, and society as a whole, and to respect the child's privacy, rights, and citizenship. Discourses of childhood can be viewed from two perspectives, namely caregiving from the point of view of adult and caretaking from the point of view of the child. The discourses formulated by the perspective of the child are the following: the discourse of children's right, the discourse of children's need, and the discourse of children's quality of life. The discourses that look at childhood from the perspective of adults are as follows: the discourse of the care and protection, the discourse of the discipline and punishment, and the discourse of silence and innocence. The phenomenon of digital childhood foregrounds the contradiction between the perspectives of caring and receiving care. That is, it makes you wonder whose wishes, those of children or adults, determine what is most important for child's interest and future happiness. It is clear that discourses of the needs, rights, and quality of life of children have become much louder and more dominant. while the role of adults seems to become less visible. Respectively, digital childhood is constructed as child-centered and with a focus on the child as an active and competent being who can independently access at least the latest advances in science and technology. It is apparent that digital childhood is a rather controversial concept based on a number of still very heated debates about the disappearance of childhood, or conversely about the emergence of childhood constructed by children themselves in the digital age, about the impact of technology on the child's development and socialization, about technology-induced changes in the social hierarchy between children and adults, and debate of the recognition of the child as an agent idea in the digital culture. Reviewing the debate on the future of the childhood phenomenon, it becomes clear that the answer to the question of whether childhood is disappearing or strengthening is still unclear, and the views on the topic are quite polarized. Skeptical researchers believe that technologies have destroyed childhood, focus on the entertaining function of digital technologies, and the growing moral panic about the negative effects on the internet and computer games on children's psyche and socialization. The dehumanizing role of technologies, which is damaging to children's health and development, is stressed. In addition, it is emphasized that digital technologies are gradually gradually pushing people out of the center of social ecology, replacing them with a device and thus destroying the usual forms of human communication, culture, and social habits. The destruction of childhood is based on the fact that when children access the internet, they gain access to information that declassifies the adult world and essentially destroys the usual criteria for understanding childhood: biological age, segregation of forms and premises of activities, the system of social institutions, care network. A digital culture, these criteria do not, in digital culture, these criteria do not work because it is not possible to separate children from age inappropriate information and activities due to the internet. The internet also violates the limitation of physical space. A child who is theoretically in their room is practically absent when connected to the internet, which is a public space. And third, the alienation of adults from children's culture creates confusion in upbringing and limits adults' ability to both care and control. Optimistic researchers argue that childhood has not disappeared. On the contrary, its social construct is more stable than ever. The internet has freed children from adult custody and control, made them a social group with the rights to self-expression, with the opportunity to build their own culture, their own communities. Within this approach, the computer represents a window to the new world that reach out to children, address their developmental needs, and allow them to achieve new goals. It is argued that for the first time in the digital age, children's culture is being constructed by children themselves. Digital childhood is treated as independent world of children's own culture, a set of social practices. When accessing the internet, children are not in essence ignorant and informationally innocent. Their skills in using technologies prevent them from being perceived as disabled and dependent on adults. For example, it is the youngest members of society who are usually asked for advice on how to use technologies. We can conclude that in digital age, children themselves create childhood by reproducing and interpreting the adult world according to their own needs and experience, which means not the disappearance of childhood for children, but the loss of adult custody and control. In turn, this means that only adults experience the disappearance of childhood, but today's children enjoy and live it much more intensively than previous generation of children. In this context has prompted discussion about the changes in the social hierarchy between children and adults caused by invasion of technologies. In digital culture, the model of communication between children and adults is changing. Today, the child has rights, knowledge, opinions, and etc. And the relationship in which the adults has always dominated are gradually becoming more equal. The phenomenon of digital childhood has problematized the relationship with a child in general, in broader social context. In digital culture, the child has become a consumer equal to the adult, and his or her views play a role in political debates. The signing of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child in 1989 led to the construction of a child-centered society in which the child occupies an equal position in the social hierarchy. With digitalization processes become one of the most important pillars of children's equality and social inclusion. Is it easy for adults to accept? Definitely not. It's challenging and irritating. The whole world is still learning to deal with this because all aspects mentioned above point the need in redefining the involvement of parents and teachers in forming the new pedagogical culture. I would like to stress that today's children's is exclusively, I would like to stress that today's childhood is exclusively digital childhood, because in essence today, Western culture does not have an active social life outside of digitalization. So today, childhood without digitalization is like a simulation, an artificial attempt to turn back time to revive something that has passed away. Of course, many know the practice when parents and educators purposefully isolate children from technologies and the internet, that it should be seen as an exception rather than a rule. In today's world, the social agency envisages the skillful use of technologies. If we want a child to socialize and to be able to become an active member of society, sooner or later, they will have to know how to use digital technologies. The debate about the impact of digital technology on children's development, learning and values is one of the most topical, and everyone who raises children today has thought about it at some point. And although today social sciences mostly study childhood both conceptually and empirically from the perspective of socialization, recently it is due to this context of this discussion that there is a shift to medical and neuroscience research. It is clear that on the one hand, the major changes of children's lives brought about the new technologies have unprecedented potential for positive development, especially when it comes to learning. But on the other hand, digitalization is often seen as a threat to humanity and can have a significant impact on childhood's development and meaningful life in the future. So the question is, does technology help or harm the child? In today's welfare society, parents very often observe the following home scene. Children prefer spending their time alone in their room when they work with technologies and do so behind closed doors. And they are not at all sad if for the whole day they have had no opportunity to talk with a living person or leave the house. Compared to the childhood experience of contemporary adults, this situation seems abnormal and even unacceptable, dangerous. In our opinion, the normal child gets up, then eats breakfast to run out of the house, and then returns to eat lunch or to go to bed in the evening. Parents are not in peace with their children's new life model, but they cannot really change it because the traditional methods are not the effective ways to change modern children's habits. Analyzing modern childhood, researchers also acknowledge the presence of several specific features of digital childhood that can become both risks and opportunities in children's future lives. It all depends on the involvement of adults in the development of children's social life scenario. In culture of digital childhood, the culture of digital childhood is not good or bad. It has developed over the last few decades, and it is up to adults to take into account its specificity in order to cooperate with children. In addition, it must be remembered that the society in which children live is essentially designed and constructed by us adults. One of the typical features of digital childhood, as well as its acknowledged risks, is the so-called domestication or isolation of children at home, which causes the formation of the indoor child social phenomenon. Since the internet is in every smartphone, in every person's pocket 24 hours per day, researchers place more emphasis not on isolation in the house as a physical space, but rather to the isolation in a media-centered space that is a place with the internet, where the internet is available and where one can spend time. This is about a transition from people's daily life from place to space, which is typical of digital culture. If traditionally a child's behavior was characterized by his or her desire to be in the same room with other family members, such as parents, brothers, and sisters, then for a modern child to be in a room with the internet access is more important than to be close to family members and friends. And most often, such a place is his or her room. Logically, researchers are worried that the child's safety and well-being is gradually becoming dependent on not on people, but on the presence of technology in social ecology. This phenomenon poses new risks to the children's development, such as sedentary lifestyle, decreasing level of activities, loss of cooperation skills, and etc. Another risk then can cause problems for children in digital culture, and the prevention of which is particularly important for a child's social agency, is the decline of social skills. In the process of uncontrolled use of digital technologies, children rob themselves of time that could be used for activities in real time and space. As a result, a sublimated rather than real life experience is created. That is why teenagers are often unable to handle not only problematic situations, but also to cope with basic daily activities, such as shopping, visiting hairdresser or doctor on their own. Living in the society overloaded with information, parents consider that world outside the walls of their homes to be extremely dangerous, which often makes them care inappropriately for their quite grown-up children and do what their teenagers have long been able to do on their own. In this way, adults contribute to children's social skills depletion and helplessness, reduce their chances to having proper capacity, which may conflict with children's future goals on the one hand, and their ability to take action to achieve their goals on the other hand. Thus, a young person who is planning to study on the one at one of the best universities in the world, or is planning a successful career, can face to collapse to those hopes and dreams only because he or she had not had the opportunity to learn to cope with domestic responsibilities and has not developed necessary social skills. The third risk highlighted by childhood researchers is the decline in social values of children as well as young people, the decline affecting their attitudes and habits. While living in digital culture and under influence of social networks, children have developed self-centeredness with the focus on their own rights. And that is why children are often referred to as a narcissistic social group. Such values as fame and popularity are important for them, while community values, empathy, emotional closeness become less important. This is surprising because peers spending time with them, making friends and talking have been the most characteristic interests of children and young people for centuries. In the digital age, communication between people is mostly implemented with the help of technologies through devices that reduce the possibility and necessity of direct communication, which in turn initiates such drastic changes in the hierarchy of values. The young people are very happy to put their phones to multiple use, but they don't even use them for talking. The use of technology has generally reduced the need for verbal communication. As a result, children's desire to cooperate and participate can be diminished and gives rise a so-called technoference, interruption in communication due to use of technology. The profile on social networks building and representing one's image in them can gradually become more important for children than conversation with real people and real activities in the real social space. The digital generation, more than any other before them, needs the help of real social life experts, adults, to tackle this problem. However, researchers also include that self-centeredness allows today children to become more confident, self-aware, and optimistic than their parents. Planning their futures, children have high expectations of success, which allows them to conclude the task of parents and teachers is to help them acquire skills and recognize values needed to achieve their goals without destroying their confidence and belief in themselves. Overall, the researchers conclude that children's culture is characterized by three essential features: skillful use of technologies, high demands and high expectations as regards oneself and others, and open-mindedness, which manifests in a courage to face challenges and readiness to accept them. These are characteristics that make children and young people socially capable and provide them with opportunities that are often denied to representatives of the older generations. And finally, in a course of the digital childhood analysis, we have come to a discussion about the child as an agent and his active role in the socialization process nowadays. The discussion is part of so-called equality discourse, which emphasize the right of all people. This is debate about the social hierarchy in society, about whether the white, adult, healthy, heterosexual, and man still has the right to dominate over those who do not represent this group. This is discussion about whether the child is small, helpless, passive, and vulnerable, and also a creature physically punishable for disobedience to adults, a creature which can be corrupted by the outside world. Here we discuss whether we accept that child is an active person who has an opinion and who constructs his or her identity from the early age whether the world around him or her should be smoothed and cleansed, or the child should be helped to learn how to understand it and function in it. To describe this discussion, this is necessary to focus on the analysis of the notion of child's image. In a context of digital childhood, I would like to offer to look at 4 images of the child: wild, innocent, active, and child as an agent. These images demonstrate the public perception of the child's role in the social hierarchy. They will be explained to illustrate the discussion of whether the child is contrasted with adult society in a secondary role or the relatively equivalent role in relation to the adults. The child image, Homo ferus, or wild child, was formulated by the master of classical sociology, Emil Durkheim, in the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century. This concept is based on the assumption that the immature person is uncultured and uncivilized creature. Consequently, the child is a person who has not yet acquire a cultural body, so he or she is similar to a savage. Thus, due to the child's very nature, society perceives him as antisocial, dependent, and unruly, and it makes him obey to established social order and norms. The children need discipline, control, and punishment. Because our methods do not work on the savage, because he simply does not understand everything else. The presumption that the child as a savage underlies and justifies the needs to use an authoritarian upbringing style. The goal of raising a little savage is to achieve his or her obedience. An adult, as opposed to a child, is a cultural being, a civilized person, and therefore fully determines what is necessary and suitable for a child. The sociologist Talcott person also offers his vision to obedience while creating an image of an innocent child. Parsons emphasized that the child is an unexperienced and sinless being, and therefore is innocent, helpless, incompetent, unfinished, and not fully formed. In a world full of sin and evil scares him. The world full of sin and evil scares him. So adult guardianship and care needed so that a child may grow up with the least possible harm. And the longer child remains ignorant, the better will grow, because childhood is a stage of happy ignorance followed by getting to know the evil world and the loss of happiness. It is therefore important to protect child for as long as possible from anything that adults see as even potentially dangerous. In the context of this child's image, the silence discourse is very important, and that is the less the child knows, the better. In the first half of the 20th century, George Herbert Mead, the creator of the theory of symbolic interactionism, offered the image of an active child, which can be seen as a transition from idea of the child's passive role to the active one. By emphasizing the importance of the child's own activity in constructing his or her life world, the child's image already marks the development of child-centered pedagogical discourse. In a process of socialization, the child is active, does not only fulfill the expectation of others, but also works on his or her own development. Active children learn to behave in the context of social rules and norms and use what they learn to shape their future. The child learns patterns of behaviors and rules by playing with peers. Children try out social roles that are familiar to them and compare themselves with other children, learn to accept and interpret social roles and give meaning to their actions. However, The active child manifests only among peers, as the directors of their life are adults. Although in a process of parenting, give the child possibilities for independence, they remain the real managers of child's actions. Consequently, the child-centeredness in this child's image is considered to be only conditional. Thus, an active child is an apple in his parents' eyes, who attends innumerable groups to develop all possible talents. The amount of activities is a measure of the value of the child as a project of an adult. The assumption applies here is follows. The more activities the more active the person is in childhood, the more successful the one will be as an adult. In the 1990s, different understanding of child's image emerged in a discourse of social sciences, namely child as an agent. The image merged the usual boundaries between child's and adult cultures. It is this image of the child that activates the debate about the disappearance of childhood and changes in the social hierarchy between children and adults. Unlike the above-mentioned social images, a child as an agent is full-fledged person, thinking, competent, innovative, able to express an opinion. They not only simply reproduce in the social environment, but also interpret it and becomes a constructor and an active subject in their life. This child image transforms the goal of parenting from obedience to the promotion of the child's capacity for action in respectful pedagogical communication. Achieving this goal of parenting requires a change of the focus of parenting. An empowered child cannot be perceived as helpless and vulnerable or unreasonable and uncultured, but as a person who is aware of his and her needs and rights, competent and independent. It should be emphasized that in digital culture, the empowered child has changed from theoretical to the real social phenomenon. For example, manufacturers of digital technologies, toys and other goods and products targeted at children have long understood this. So they address children as independent buyers and consumers by passing their parents. Children take part in testing new products, suggesting improvements and get paid for it. Of course, the position of the empowered child poses certain risks in upbringing, such as misunderstand child-centered parenting, in which needs are mixed with desires. Let us remember the saying that not everything we want is what we need, as well as the fact that agency arises from responsibility and respect for rules, but not from permissiveness. However, it is apparent that in order to minimize or avoid potential risks, the parenting of an empowered child requires quite a different pedagogical approach. In its turn, it explains the ambiguity of today's parenting goals and allows researchers around the world to describe the situation as a confusion in parenting. In addition, for adults bringing up children in digital culture, a new and unknown form of culture is a task with a large number of unknown variables. Thank you.
And maybe we meet in this constellation, Professor Rubene and me, like water and oil. I don't know anything about pedagogy and digitalization, and my field would be rather theology. But I found really interesting this stress and also an inevitability of digitalization, and first of all, on the understanding of the child as an agent who is able to to decide, able to act, to participate in political issues, and really influence its own world. But in my response, I would like to go now to this three to put these three together: child, religion, religious education, and digitalization. And maybe my questions are rather meant as questions for discussion to all of us, not only as a response to report of Professor Rubene. And first question, and I was probably I'm putting it as an adult, of course, but my first question is about what could religious education do for safety of the child in digital world. The digitalization, at least theoretically, infinitely increases child's exposure to different worldviews, beliefs, and religions you can meet online. And on one hand, it can serve in very good way. So, for example, the influence of the family and immediate analog environment can become relative. It can have its fortunate sides. There is a debate over years about whether and how children should be brought up religiously, if at all. And there has been a particular emphasis by critiques of religion, the child, for example, Richard Dawkins, that the child should not be indoctrinized. I don't agree with that. We also yesterday spoke about that also parents have the rights to educate their children or according their own understanding of religion. But I found interesting what Nicholas Humphrey, an English neurophysiologist, says. Children, I'll argue, have a human right not to have their minds crippled by exposure to other people's bad ideas, no matter who these other people are. And he criticizes the too much stress or too much influence from parents. Parents, he says, correspondingly have not God-given license to enculturate their children in whatever ways they personally choose, a right to limit the horizons of their children's knowledge, to bring them up in an atmosphere of dogma and superstition, or to insist they follow the straight and narrow path of their own faith. And he considers that we as a society have the duty to protect them from it. He also stresses that, on the other hand, it would be the public duty to ensure the child is surrounded by the truth, as he thinks. For example, scientific cosmology. I don't really share the opinion of Humphrey just because he seems to think that the society as a whole is a carrier of one conviction. But I definitely agree that children have the right not to be polluted by any kind of bad ideas, no matter where these bad ideas come from. And it seems that digital technologies and the internet, as a part of child's life at least, provide access to worldwide outside the family. Of course, with exceptions to those groups which deny usage of technologies, like, I don't know, Amish, for example. And the digital offer gives greater opportunities to escape a closely knit analog context, which can serve to and can serve to broaden the child's horizons. But I also think there are some limits of those digital opportunities. We know the sad examples of radical and extremist groups recruiting on the internet. Well, I have to admit that most of them are interested in adults and young adults, which are probably the target group, but also, anyway, how to minimize children's exposure to the risks of digital world. The report of Professor Rubene addressed the challenges that life in the digital world poses in the analog environment, such as too much time spending in one's own room. But there should be attention paid to contents, also to the dangers, let's say, in the digital world. And then we also come back to the parents. As Professor of Social Psychology Sonia Livingston says, and I found this quotation of the website of UNICEF, instead of worrying about how long children spend online, Global Kids Online research suggests that parents should engage positively with their children's digital world and discuss with them the specific content and contact risks they may encounter, so that children can gain resilience and thrive. So it is important to think about how the acting child and protecting parent, anyway, can work together for child's well-being in encountering the digital opportunities. And especially, and that could be the case in many times, if the parents are not able to help due to lack of digital skills or due to insufficient religious knowledge, then this issue is sent to school, to religious education. And so we have to say that religious education is an issue of well-being and of safety of the child in digital worlds. And unfortunately, I think we are not really prepared for that in Latvia. And we don't really we are not really aware of that. And I would be very happy also to hear the experience from other countries. The second question, what kind of religion in this digital era is the content of religious education? I agree with the expression my colleague Juris Cālītis said yesterday. Digitalization is really like tsunami, and we cannot avoid that. And also sociologists like David Ronfeld and Dick Becker stress, with digitalization, we are now at the transition to the next organizational form of our society, because now there are fast-acting networks that provide structure. And it is the same also for religion, for example, for the church. I recently took part in a joint German-Baltic seminar, and the main topic of which was the digitalization of the church. And the discussion was not about online services, websites, and sermons that are posted on various websites and various other ways church can express itself in the digital environment. But it was about the church as a community which is forming and living in digital world, just as any other group of followers is formed, for example, in Instagram or Facebook. So church is also a set of such followers. There were examples of pastors posting their messages online every day and attracting a large number of followers. And as one of the colleagues said, the church needs to go where the people are right now. And this is increasingly the case, that people are to find in this digital world. by the way, I thought about the church in the first century, about the Pauline parishes, and they were organized very similar to the forms which were known in the environment, the collegia or societies, and also the churches were probably organized very similar to that. So it would be nothing new for the church to be organized like the other groups in our environment. And of course, also to meet the children, to meet the child, we have to go online where the children are. This would mean also, of course, for the religious education that it must take place digitally if it is to reach the child. And without doubt, it offers also a variety of benefits. I don't know, the symbols that live in the digital world can help to create subject-oriented religious education, for example, selfie as a basis for discussing the search for an open self-identity and so on. But the question is now, the religion is changing. What is the religion, or a religion, I don't know, as a subject of religious education, regarding the speed of digitalization and decreasing numbers of churchgoers? Will, in the very short future, will all the analog religious life be the snow from yesterday? Isn't all the religious education that talks, for example, about the analog church, about meeting in the church, also belonging to yesterday? And there is obviously a theological work to be done to redefine what is, for example, the church online. Who is a person? Who is the God in this context of the new possibilities? What is actually the religion online? And also my question would be, should the religious education be used to recall the traditional, the analog, or to prepare for such an online community? How does the digital change religious experiences? It would be also, it should be also part of the part of preparation, the religious education. And in addition, we have to be aware also that for the children, some of our concepts are changing the meaning, and this digitalization changes the meaning of many concepts. And for example, my son has been living in a hell for a while. Of course, the digital hell, because it was an opportunity or possibility in Minecraft. So for him, hell is first of all connected to this game. He, as many of his age, are playing online. And yesterday we also spoke about with some colleague about the new app, Be Real. What meant to put online at the pictures of oneself in just in a moment you receive the message, no, you should do that. And to be real is to be online in that way. So I think it's quite a huge challenge for the pedagogy or religious education. And third, about, and this is not so connected with religious education, but the third question would be regarding freedom to choose the digital world or not. And basically, I agree with the opinion expressed by Professor Zanda Rubene that the culture of digital childhood is neither good or bad, it simply exists. And most sensible thing is to take it into account. And when we create operation with children, and I support the principle openness to digitalization. In other words, actually, the realistic view that it's not possible to turn wheel backwards and, in fact, artificially hinder a child's involvement in digital world. They also cannot not to think about those who can't or don't want to get involved in this digital world. How to reconcile the digital world with analog, to those who have the knowledge and skills to take advantage of digital opportunities, and those who cannot and maybe even don't want to do so. Whether and how these parts of humanity are reconcilable generations, but also persons with different approaches to digital world. The expansion of digital world can also be seen as a dictatorship, where the person has no longer have the choice to participate or not, or to be exposed to different algorithms of the internet life. And addition, I would say that part of at least Latvian population still has only limited opportunity to provide a child with necessary computer equipment, even if only for online learning or school assignments. And Latvia may not be the only country in Europe with such a challenge. So will there be space in the future for the dinosaurs of analog world and the freedom to choose the digital? Thank you for your attention, and one more time, thanks for the excellent report.
Thank you so much, Dace. And would you like to respond, Zanda?
Thank you, Dace. And of course, this is not my field of competence to answer to the questions. They are questions to you, dear colleagues, about religious education and so on. But I thought about the thesis which colleague Juris Calitis said yesterday about tsunami of digitalization. That digitalization is like tsunami in our lives. But actually, I would like to stress that in lives of adults, it wasn't tsunami. It was joy and fun, and we let digitalization in our daily life with a pleasure. But if we're thinking about habits of children, then we see already tsunami. And very often I have opportunity to speak with teachers and with parents, and they have a kind of position that children are broken. like devices. Children's habits are damaged and broken. And please, Zanda, Rubene, be so kind and help us to fix it. And actually, the story about digitalization and children is about, in general, this is about a hierarchy between adult and child, and who is the boss, and who have to be obedient to whom. And I always remember a discussion with my dad. It was about my parenting, and it was not about digitalization, but about other one thing. But he gave me like a metaphor. And metaphor was about that should we close the sea, or looking after our children on the sea. And this is the same we until now. And I thinking that's some way connected with your idea about indoctrination as well. Yeah. How should we change the world or prepare children for new circumstances in this world? Yeah? And this is about digitalization as well. Of course, I love digitalization as a concept. I love this topic. This is my digital childhood, digital culture, digital generation is a topics of mine's last decade. I saw how it develops and so on. And maybe you know, maybe not, but last November, United Nations of Declaration of Children's Rights has complement with a new comment, and this is children's right to have access to digital technologies. This is already since last year already human right and children's right, and maybe it sounds very easy comment, but this comment is to 25 pages, I believe. This is a lot of information, and of course, from the one hand, of course, we are pushed to live in digital culture. From the other hand, we have a lot of refugees from Ukraine in Latvia at the moment, and my colleague from Kiev Pedagogical University, she was there for a few months, and she is already in Kiev because she wouldn't like to stay there and so on. But she told me, thanks God. Maybe this is not correct in this audience to say, but thanks God, no, I would like to say it like this. Thanks COVID. Thanks COVID that we have those new skills to work remotely, because university in Kiev works until now. Some students are in a war, some students are in basements, some students and teachers are abroad. But it works. Because of digitalization, and again, digital devices are not good or bad. It all depends how we use them, and that's a told some reflections gave us some reflections about situation in Latvia. And Latvia, I took part in research of European Commission. It was 2018, 17, 18, 21 country took part in this research about young children and digital technologies. And our group was children from 0 till 8. The problem with digitalization and childhood is that how I already told you, this is completely new social phenomenon, and nobody knows how to rise up 0-year-old children who use digital devices, because at the moment in this 2018 they were 47% of 11 months from 11 months to 2 years old children who uses the digital technologies every day, once per day, and Latvia was in very specific situation, and post-Soviet countries as well. And maybe this is again something about digital religious education and education as such. Scandinavia were in good position. It was now I miss the term. It was this kā bija atbalstoši? Supportive approach from parents, and from young age children learned how to use technologies and how to develop social skills and digital skills as well. In Italy, Portugal, and this part of Europe, it was more aizliedzošā bija no, not forbidden, aizliedzoša pieeja, permissive. No, it's not possible to say forbidden approach in which we forbidden to use, it's forbidden to use for children technologies. But we, Latvia, Lithuania, and not Estonia, but Latvia and Lithuania, and some countries from Eastern Europe as well, we were somewhere in a gray part of it. It was allowed for children to use technologies without any support from parents. And this is really really specific situation, and we in general in Latvia, and now I speak as educational scientist, we have not enough parents' involvement in upbringing and education of children as well. So this is my comment.